The papers were in my hand when I walked into that conference hall. Everything was in order. My assignment was clear. I had done this kind of operation before, entering a Christian gathering, working from the inside to disrupt what God was trying to do in that room, cause confusion, break concentration, extinguish the atmosphere of genuine worship before it could build into something that threatened our operations. Routine. I was dressed like any other attendee. Nothing about me announced what I was or why I was there. That was the point. An agent who announces himself is an agent who has already failed. I moved through the crowd, took my position, waited for the right moment. And then my hands shifted, papers slipped. A moment of physical clumsiness so ordinary, so human, so completely unlike the supernatural precision I had been trained to operate with. They hit the floor, all of them. I bent to collect them, fast, efficient, reaching for each sheet, but there were people around me, and hands, helpful, innocent, Christian hands, reaching down to help gather what had scattered. And one of those hands picked up a document, and paused, and looked at what was written on it. I watched the pastor's face as he read my degree from the Voodoo School of Witchcraft, and I knew everything was about to change. My name is Gideon Mulenga Kabila. Last time I told you how I was born into darkness and what that kingdom built inside of me. Today I am going to tell you what happened when the darkness was exposed and what God was doing in the background of every moment I thought I was in control.
Before I tell you about the conference, I need to go back and tell you more about the years that led to it. Because you need to understand what I was when I walked into that hall. Not a curious recruit. Not a young man who had been partially initiated and partially understood the kingdom. I was a senior official, a man with rank, with territory, with decades of operation behind me. I want to tell you about the assignments. Road accidents. This was one of the most common and most effective methods of destruction assigned to agents at my level. A road in Zambia, a vehicle, an assignment to ensure it did not reach its destination. I caused accidents on the Great East Road, one of Zambia's main highways, connecting Lusaka to the eastern provinces. A road that tens of thousands of people travel every year. A road that has seen its share of tragedies that newspapers reported as mechanical failure or driver error, or the simple, terrible randomness of life. Not all of those tragedies were random. I want to be careful here. I am not saying every accident on every road in Zambia had a spiritual cause. I am saying that some of them did. And I know because I was on the other side of some of them.
The bridge on the Great East Road, I caused that to collapse. I say that plainly because anything less plain would be a form of cowardice about my own history. The bridge collapsed, people were on it, and I was the instrument of what happened. This is what I carry. This is what I confess. Hospital deaths. We had agents deployed in hospitals, not in the obvious way, not people working as nurses or doctors who were secretly harming patients, though that happened in other territories. Our method was more invisible than that. We operated in the spirit realm within hospital wards, moving between beds, identifying targets, executing assignments that manifested as complications, as sudden deterioration, as deaths that the medical staff could not explain because the cause was not in any tissue or organ they could examine. The most vulnerable patients were the easiest targets, the ones already at the edge, the ones whose bodies had already been weakened by illness, the ones whose families had stopped watching through the night. I oversaw these operations in my territory. I reviewed the reports. I gave instructions. I did it without losing a night of sleep.
Church disruptions. This was the assignment I was on when everything fell apart. We disrupted churches systematically, not dramatically, not bursting through doors, not announcing ourselves. The disruptions were subtle. A quarrel breaking out between two deacons at a critical moment. A child crying at the exact second a pastor reached a crescendo of his message. A spirit of heaviness descending on a congregation that had been worshiping freely just moments before, making every voice feel leaden, every heart feel distant, every prayer feel like it was hitting the ceiling and falling back. We sent agents in physical form too. Human agents, people initiated into the kingdom who attended churches as regular members, whose presence over time corroded the atmosphere, spread gossip, created factions, gave the enemy a foothold that slowly expanded from a foothold into a territory. I was skilled at this work, which is why when I was assigned to that conference, nobody expected what happened. Least of all, me.
Part 2. The dream before the conference. The night before I went to that conference, I had a dream. Not a dark dream, not a dream from the kingdom, not soul travel, not assignment, not the underground world that had been as familiar to me as my own bedroom for most of my life. Something different. I dreamed of a man. I will not describe this man in detail because the description would be inadequate, but I will tell you what I felt in his presence in that dream. I felt seen, completely, thoroughly, uncomfortably seen. The way you feel when someone looks at you and you realize they are not looking at the surface of you, but through it, all the way through. Seeing everything you have done, everything you are, everything you have been given, and everything you have chosen. And the remarkable thing, the thing that stayed with me when I woke up, was that this man did not look at me with hatred. I had expected hatred. If anything in the universe had reason to hate me, it was whatever this was. I had spent my life in the service of everything opposed to it. I had caused suffering on a scale I cannot fully quantify even now. I had taken 80 lives in service of a kingdom built on the destruction of human beings. And he looked at me with something I had no category for. I woke up disturbed, not frightened, not convicted, not yet, but disturbed in the way that a settled thing is disturbed when something larger than it moves nearby. My certainties, my foundations, my complete comfort with who I was and what I served, they were still intact, but something had touched them, lightly, almost imperceptibly.
I got up. I gathered my papers for the conference. I told myself it was just a dream. I went.
Part 3. The Floor. I have replayed that moment so many times. The papers leave in my hand, the specific angle of the fall, which sheets went where, which one landed face up in front of the pastor's feet. I have asked myself whether I dropped them on purpose, whether something in me, the part that had been touched by that dream, the part that was disturbed and unsettled and did not yet know what to do with that disturbance, whether that part made my hands loosen deliberately. I honestly do not know. What I know is that they fell, and I know that the degree from the voodoo school of witchcraft landed where a pastor could pick it up and read what was written on it. I watched his face change as he read. There is a specific quality to the moment when a man of God encounters genuine evidence of what he has always believed but rarely seen this directly. His eyes did not widen dramatically. He did not gasp. He became very still. The particular stillness of a person who is realigning their understanding of the room they are standing in. Then he looked up, and he looked at me. And I felt something I had not felt since I was 7 years old in my bed at midnight when that dark figure had come to collect me. I felt exposed. Not just seen. I had been seen before by supernatural things far more powerful than this pastor. But exposed. Like a wound that has been covered for so long, the covering has become part of you, and someone has just removed it.
He said nothing to me in that moment, but the way he was looking at me communicated everything. He knew what I was. He knew why I was there. And more than that, he knew what I was holding and what it meant. I tried to leave immediately. The instinct of an exposed agent is always the same. Extract, disappear, regroup. I moved toward the exit. But the kingdom does not always protect its own when it has been embarrassed. When an operation is compromised, when an agent has been careless enough to scatter their credentials across the floor of a conference hall, the response from above is not protection, it is abandonment. I found myself unable to move the way I expected to move. My abilities, the supernatural speed, the invisibility, the ease of transition between realms that I had relied on for decades, they felt suddenly unreliable, sluggish, as if the signal had been interrupted. The pastor had called others. I was surrounded, not violently, not aggressively, just surrounded by people who are praying. And the prayer in that room, genuine, informed, targeted prayer from people who now understood exactly what they were dealing with, was the most disorienting thing I had ever experienced. I was removed from the conference. The police were looking for me. In the natural world, I was a disruption, an intruder, a problem to be managed. But in the spirit world, something far more significant was happening. The kingdom had not come to rescue me. I was alone. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely alone. Part 4. Running and being found. I ran. Not because I was physically afraid of the police or the pastor or the people at that conference. My fear was deeper than that. The thing I was running from was the exposure itself. The fact that I had been seen, that my credentials were in someone else's hands, that the careful invisibility of decades had been shattered in a moment of carelessness. And underneath that fear, something else was running. The dream. That face. That look. That impossible, unearned, completely unreasonable quality of what I had seen in that man's eyes. I could not outrun it. I tried to return to normal operations. I went back to my assignments. I tried to step back into the machinery of the kingdom and resume my position. But something had shifted. The instructions that had always come with such clarity now felt distant. The certainty that had been the ground under my feet for my entire life now had cracks in it. And the dream kept coming back. Not every night, but often enough that I could not dismiss it. Often enough that the face of that man, the man who had looked at me with something I could not name, became more present to me than any briefing from the kingdom. I want to tell you something about the way God pursues a person. He does not use the same methods as the enemy. The enemy uses fear. The enemy uses coercion, dependency, threat. The covenant you make with darkness is designed to make you afraid to leave it. Afraid of what will happen if you stop serving, if you try to walk away, if you choose differently. God does not operate that way.
What I experienced in those weeks and months after the conference was not pressure. It was presence. A quiet, consistent, unhurried presence that did not demand anything, did not threaten anything, did not promise me prosperity or power or protection in exchange for compliance. It just stayed near me, around me, in the edges of my awareness, like a light that is too far away to see clearly, but too present to pretend is not there. I am not a man who cries easily. My mother's education had removed most of the softness from me decades before. But one night, alone, in the dark, I found myself weeping without knowing exactly why. And in that moment, I made a decision. I was going to find the Apostolic Church. Part 5. The Night of Fire. I will not make the deliverance sound easy. It was not easy. When I walked into the Apostolic Church and told them who I was and what I had been, there was no membership letter required. There was no bureaucratic process. There was the immediate, focused, fully engaged response of a body of believers who understood that a man at the edge of the deepest pit was asking for a hand. They gave me one. The prayers that night were not quiet prayers, not the polite, managed prayers of a congregation going through the motions. These were the prayers of people who had been prepared for exactly this moment, who knew the territory, who understood the hierarchy of what they were fighting, who had the spiritual authority and the personal history with God to stand in the gap for a man who did not yet know how to stand for himself. And what happened in the spirit realm that night as those prayers went up? I felt the kingdom respond. I need you to understand that the kingdom does not let its senior officials leave quietly. I was junior assistant to the master for 3 regions of Africa. The intelligence I carried, the operations I was involved in, the covenants that bound me, losing me was not a small matter to the powers of darkness. They came, not with gentleness, with everything they had. Attacks in the spirit realm, pressure on my body, voices, the Queen's voice, voices of the hierarchy I had served for 3 decades, all of them saying the same thing they always say when an agent tries to leave. You will die without us. You cannot survive outside our covering. Come back. And the prayers in that room answered every single voice, not with arguments, not with theological debate, with the name of Jesus, just the name, spoken by people who knew the person behind the name, who had walked with him long enough to carry his authority in their voices. I felt covenants break, physically felt them, like chains that had been embedded in my flesh, being drawn out of me. The knife that had been part of my identity since I was 7 years old, in the spirit, I watched it dissolve. The black gown that my mother had placed on my shoulders in that bedroom, gone. The degree from the voodoo school of witchcraft, the document that had destroyed my cover, it was no longer relevant. What it certified no longer existed in me. I lay on the floor of the Apostolic Church and I was empty, clean empty. And then, slowly, quietly, with a warmth I had never felt from any source in any kingdom, something began to fill the space.
I have not told you yet about what happened with my mother, about the conversations we had after my deliverance, about what it meant to face the person who had given me to darkness before I could speak, and what grace looked like in that space. And there was the calling. Because God, when He delivers a person, does not deliver them into emptiness. He delivers them into purpose. And the purpose He had for me after the darkness was connected directly to the darkness itself. What I had seen, what I had done, what I knew. The testimony was not mine to keep. It was mine to give. Episode 3 is the final chapter. The aftermath, the calling, the life that darkness tried to end before it could begin. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because what God does with a broken life is the greatest story of all.
I was lost in the deep, where no light could reach, bound by chains I could not see, too far gone, so I thought, but love came and solved every broken part of me. He found me in the darkness. He found me when no one else could see me there, when no one else could see me there. He found me, me through the fire. He found me and He called me by my name. He found me. I had wandered so far, carried every scar from a life I did not choose. But the morning came through and I finally knew there was nothing left to lose. He found me in the darkness. He found me when no one else could see me there, when no one else could see me there. He found me, me through the fire. He found me and He called me by my name. He found me. I was deep, deeper than most will ever go. And He still came, not when I was worthy, when I was still covered in everything I had done. He still came.